Welcome back to the Quilting Stories Podcast. I'm Jeff Rutherford, and you can find me on Instagram at Jeff Rutherford. And I'm joined on today's podcast by my co-host, Elaine Poplin, a quilter from Huntsville, Alabama. And you can find her on Instagram at Messy Goat. And our guest today that we're excited to have is Quilter Karen K. Stone. And you can find Karen on Instagram at Karen K. Stone. Karen is a quilter from Dallas, Texas. Her quilts have won numerous awards in international competitions. Her clam session received the Master of Innovative Artistry Award from the International Quilt Association in 2009. And her Indian orange peel was People's Choice at Quilt National 95. And her quilt Lying Ties was in Houston for the juried show at the International Quilt Festival last year. She's a quilt teacher and has had several quilting books published. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Absolutely. It's great having you here. So I'm curious, how would you, and obviously this is audio, so it's not visual, but how would you describe the quilts that you're currently making?
That I'm currently making? Wow. I've given myself over to improvisation. And I probably won't stop being a traditional maker also. But I really found that that improvisation interests me and challenges me and excites me. So that's where I am right now, doing abstract work.
That's great. And before we started the interview, you mentioned that you have studied with Nancy Crow and that you're currently working on, I think you said 10 different quilt tops. I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about that? Like what got you interested in working with Nancy, and how has that process been for you so far?
Well, I guess I met her early on. I've been quilting for 35 years. So Nancy was at Houston, I mean, back in the old days. And, it was a goal to know her better and to study with her. I didn't go to art school. I went to, I studied music. So I felt like there are a lot of things in my background that are just kind of missing. So to be able to finally have the time and space now that my kids are older, to go for 2 weeks and study with Nancy at the barn, it was, I hate the term bucket list, but it was one of those long-term kind of goals. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, learning quite a lot.
Excellent. I have to say, before we go too deeply into this, that I'm having a bit of a fangirl moment.
Oh, I am too, Elaine.
because I made your Cinco de Mayo quilt, and that's the first one that I had that went places. It won Best of Show here. And then I hung across from Clam Session in Paducah that year.
Gosh.
In the same little, or right behind it, I guess. So...
Well, yours probably won, and that quilt did not win in Paducah after it had won in Houston right before. I love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always it's subjective, and it's, who knows?
Oh, yeah, it means money or not, right?
Right.
But no, I'm total fangirl. I mean, I was just telling Jeff that I feel like I know both of you so well, and it's just a complete social media illusion. But I honestly, I just bought the iron that you bought. So
good. Isn't it lovely?
Oh, it's so great. It's so great.
For those of you wondering, it's a wazing. It's very heavy, but it's got no holes in the plate.
Yeah.
So it's just a dry iron, and it gets really hot, but it has auto shut off for those of us paranoid about fire.
Mine doesn't. I got the cheaper one, but
I'm such a chicken.
But I know, I understand. But and it doesn't make a sound when it's heating up either, so it's extra dangerous.
Well, Elaine is fangirling and I'm fanboying. So I've followed. I have followed your quilts for a long time, and I haven't made Cinco de Mayo, but it's on my bucket list. I have made another New York Beauty several years ago, but Cinco de Mayo is definitely on my list.
That's fun.
It's an amazing one to make. It's fun.
So you mentioned that you majored in music and piano. Can you tell us a little bit about how you did get started sewing and quilting? And was it something that you, did your mother or grandmother sew?
Oh, yes. My mother, not so much. But I had two grandmothers who really loved me and spent a lot of time with me and taught me and read to me and, everything. And one of them was a very fine seamstress who made all my clothes. I was the only granddaughter on either side. So she made all my clothes, and I was always just adorable, so precious, the little curls and all that shit. It's awful. Little trained monkey. But and then my other grandmother had that get it done, use it up kind of philosophy. And I love having both of those influences as a quilter. And to have a sewing machine in your bedroom was just natural to me. So when I was in grad school and just starving, I started making clothes. I got my old sewing machine, my mom's old sewing machine, and started making clothes, and then had babies. And that's, the excuse to make that first quilt for me.
Absolutely.
And we were also, again, before we started recording, we were talking about kind of the obsession of making quilts and making a lot of them. I'm curious, when you made that first baby quilt, was it something that immediately you were like, wow, I want to do another one? And I'm just curious, like going from those baby quilts to then what was kind of your evolution to kind of like when someone said, could you teach a class?
I don't know. I started, it's so long ago, Jeff. I have such Alzheimer's. I really, but it's just like I had a mentor Renella Babin Deloney, who a guild member, my mom's friend, who got me started in that hand piecing, and this is how you bury the knot in the bat when you hand quilt. And this is applique. This is really basic. Spent a day with me, fed me cake, made and told me, in quilting, anything that you do that's original, it'll always be honored. Okay. Who gets that in their first quilting lesson? Right.
Yeah, that's great.
It was a jump before that, from that baby quilt in 1986, just to my New York beauty quilt, in 1993. It was it felt like and paper foundation piecing, a little tool. But it was also great escape time from the intensity of the kind of parenting that we were doing in the 80s, and that quiet after everyone's gone to bed, I'd just sew, and it was a great outlet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Cinco de Mayo was for me. I had a toddler and a preschooler, and I would kit everything for the arc and put it into a Ziploc bag with the pieces in order that I would need them.
Yes.
And I would be cutting them while I was waiting for the pasta to boil. And then the second the girls went to bed, I was at the sewing machine running them through. And I got that quilt done that way in 5-minute bits of time. And it was an escape. It was how I stayed off the news.
When I made mine, my kids were that I'm driving all day long and running a pattern company, and I just like, okay, I can make a block a day. And,
wow.
And then the quilt is done in a month, but yeah.
Yeah, mine took me 7. I'm not quite that industrious.
It was my job.
And then it languished for a year because I was afraid to quilt it.
But yeah, fear of quilting. I don't know. I think that's a great fear of quilting. Really got me far, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just have to do it. You finally have to do it, and it's done, and therefore you can't complain.
No, I had to give myself permission to suck, and then I was okay.
Oh, that's a big life lesson. Permission to be terrible. I mean, that's the story of my life right now.
And so, do you do your own quilting of your quilt?
I do. I'm such a terrible control freak, and I feel so chaotic that I would never involve someone else in that process, but I don't involve that many people in very much of anything. So, so yeah, but what a path to be just barely competent to be, where I am now, which I think I enjoy it. I actually enjoy it, which, is more important to me than whether it's good or not,
Absolutely.
And do you do it on a domestic or do you have a long arm?
I have a Bernina Q20, which is a sit down long arm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just everything I need. I can't believe it.
Well, in your quilts, color obviously seems to be very key to you. Can you talk to us a little bit about your process for auditioning fabrics and colors when you're starting to plan or work on a new quilt?
And that's an evolution, really. And it's my favorite thing to talk about, obviously. You have to tell me shut up in a minute. But,
talk away.
Cheryl Roy is someone that I adore and someone that, talked to me about what I was doing before I knew what I was doing. And he was like, girl, okay, do you work from a palette? And I'm like, do I what? And he's like, okay, you work from a palette. And so I do. I build a palette. And that process is separate from any other activity in quilting. And I spend time and make that gorgeous and beautiful and really satisfying to me before I sew a stitch.
Wow.
So building that palette and then matching it up to a line drawing that's compatible or suitable for it. I mean, that is a huge mystery. And I don't understand how that works when it works. I'm just grateful that it does when it does. And of course, that's just a summary kind of working from the palette. But, also the best thing about color, as far as I'm concerned, is not knowing what I'm going to love tomorrow. And I feel like our greatest gift as quilters and as artists is our passion. And the thing that makes you buy this and your friend buy that, that's magic. That's important. Mm-hmm. And so to trust your instinct when you're out there shopping and gathering or dyeing like I do now, is really, really what is going to make your work, yours and make your voice, unique in the world.
And so along those lines, I'm curious, I mean, because you have done a lot of teaching, if someone comes into your class or you're having a conversation like we're having now, do you have kind of like basic advice about kind of for someone who may be struggling to find their palette to I'm just curious.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's my favorite thing to teach. I really love it when people bring me their shopping bag and we find the quilts in the bag, because they're bringing me their passion, hopefully, not their shoulds. I bought this because I felt like I should, that's so negative. But no, I love to talk about that. And I love to talk about, that you have parameters for every palette. Every palette has its own story, its own set of little rules. And everyone is different. So I'm not teaching them how I do it. I want to find out how they do it. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. Are there fabric colors that you often gravitate to or contrast family type things? I've just noticed that contrast is huge because of a lot of the angular shapes that you use. Contrast is very, very important.
Yeah.
So are there combinations that you gravitate to?
Yeah. I mean, I think contrast is awesome. High contrast is awesome. And I think low contrast is awesome. And I think that mystery and high definition are both important in a single work. So yeah. And I think a safe place for me is to avoid the darkest darks and the lightest lights. For years, and I'm trying to grow up and really enjoy beautiful lines and high figure ground tension. And I'm spilling Nancy right now, but it's what I'm learning. It changes. It's an evolution, and it's constantly changing. So,
well, I'm curious about that. I mean, because we mentioned the Nancy Crow and the improv. I mean, because to me, that's, from the outside. And again, like we were talking about social media, like you get an idea of someone. To me, from the outside, it seems like Cinco de Mayo and some of your quilts like that were very deliberative. So I'm just, in terms of color selection and palette. So I'm just curious, how is improv sitting with you?
Well, it's, that quilt is 20 years old, right? I'm 18 years old, right? So, I'm 18 years older now.
Yeah, sure.
But that is the challenge when you learn something new. We all have this core of integrity that is that self-definition, the thing that pleases us. And so to meld what you are with what you're learning is a difficult path. So I am largely, and have been for a year or two, in an area of experimentation. But I think that, like, when Gerald Roy would look at my work, he would probably identify it, no matter what I made.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that your voice remains constant no matter what you are doing. I hope.
Sure. And how does that experimentation feel for you?
Terrifying. Just
it's uncomfortable to try to learn something new. In my experience, and so, but I think the mark of a true artist is that leaning into that discomfort is part of the thrill.
It is, and I'm getting good. I mean, 2 of the quilts that I made as homework in preparation to go see Nancy last time, those two of those quilts are in QuiltCon. So I think it must be going okay,
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Every quilt, you're just as exposed and bare and vulnerable every single time you start something new. So right now, before May, I get to do that 10 times, and
it's wonderful and terrible at the same time.
It is. It's consuming and exhilarating. It's great fun.
So I'm curious, and we can think about these 10 quilts that you're working on, but what inspires a new quilt for you? Is it the colors? Is it an image or a repeating pattern that you want to play with?
Yeah. A lot of times it's hunting and gathering, it's going out in the world and finding fabric, and then, and being passionate about, using the fabric that you've gathered and passionately bought, and figuring out what makes that fabric speak in the way that you found it beautiful originally. The quilt that I did, called Line Ties, that was in Houston, that was hunting and gathering stupid ties, like they're polyester. During COVID, when I before the vaccine, should not have been scurrying around in Goodwill, but just did, and these glowing turquoise ties just jumped into my heart, and I couldn't not do it. So things like that happen to me. They've always happened to me, where I see something, I touch it, I can't not touch it. I have to make with it. So the process is a little bit different now. But no, it always starts with the fabric. It always starts with the fabric. And I'm always inspired by antiquity, from old quilts. I love flipping through books of antique quilts and being inspired by them.
That's great.
Yeah. Well, the heart being in the traditional. Do you mean when you say you'll always be a traditional quilter at heart? Do you mean in the construction of it, or just?
Oh, I think I'll always make quilts that I consider to be traditional. And what I love about that is that as a tradition, I'm not really welcome in the, among the ranks of people who call themselves traditional, and people in the art quilt groups, the real artist people look at me and say I'm a traditional quilter. So,
Yeah, it's difficult to be on the fringe.
I don't care.
And yet I find myself here, I like it. The view's nice.
Not at all. I like you, Elaine.
Well, when I was researching for this interview, I ran across an article about an iron quilter challenge that you participated in. Can you tell us about how that worked?
Oh, no.
Things you do for money? It's just fun. There's just stuff to keep people busy between, entertained between market and festival, and you had to make something really fast. And
oh, wow.
It was fun. It was fun. I was there, so I was available. And it was fun.
That's great. So you obviously enjoy New York Beauty and Orange Peel. When did you first discover those patterns? Or was it just something that you were aware of?
Oh, I think, people that are intense, present company, of course, included.
I don't know what you mean.
I know, yeah. You see spikes, you see spires, you have to do it. But I'm done doing that. And also, I don't have confidence to think, well, I could just do this big thing. If I would be more confident if I subdivided into triangles, right? So I did a lot of that, a lot of like Lone Stars and things like that, and put spires because it's a skill set that I had. And so, yeah, it gives you more places to put fabric. The more patchwork you do, the more fabric you can squeeze in there. Yeah,
the more scraps you generate for the next one.
You know what? I don't generate scraps. Is that the weirdest thing you've ever heard?
Are you serious?
I don't make scraps. If I have, I'll work from a strip probably because I don't pre-cut anything. I work always from a strip, or a small piece, and if it's, I just don't make scraps. I just work off a big piece and then put that back in my fold. So I don't have any scraps.
Nice.
It's weird. It's odd.
No, it's fabulous. I don't, yeah. I get that. I do a lot from strips too. I don't keep the little ones. Some people keep those itty bitty teeny. No.
Elaine has been telling me for a while now to throw all that stuff out. She's like, you're just like making yourself like anxious.
Oh, you're having to sort it.
No, or store it.
And then
I have a lot.
And then the guilt.
I'm 64. I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to use it all. I need to just cut into the new fabric and cut into the middle of the new fabric. Cut into the good part of the new fabric.
Yeah. When I get home with new fabric, I always cut off 2.5 inch strips because then I can't use the, I haven't cut that yet excuse.
Oh, that's clever. I love that.
And then I can try things when I wonder.
Yeah.
I can try something and I haven't wasted anything.
Well, my way of using the new fabric is that I have a new acquisitions area. So, and that's what I'm looking at because it's on top. Yeah.
So what do you do with your new acquisitions? Do they just tempt you and tease you until you finally cave?
Well, usually there's a pattern forming in that area of storage. And if it turns yellow, you make a yellow quilt.
Okay.
I just did a really big, Seven Sisters variation kind of, and it was all the fabric that was on top the last time I bought printed fabrics, which was before COVID. So, and now I'm working in solids because of what I'm doing, what I'm learning with Nancy. I use prints too, but, so those fabrics all got made into masks. And so then there's this quilt that's full of the fabric that I made masks with because I couldn't use all of anything. So.
Right. That wasted a ton of fabric. Even though I did it, it was the strange little cuts.
Yeah.
I threw away piles, which would make Jeff twitchy, but
I know you could have sent them. You could have sent them to me.
No, I'm not going to make you store them either.
But also, you don't want to see any of that fabric ever again.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So did you say earlier that you're now dyeing fabric?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been dyeing fabric for 10 years. I took class with Carol Soderlund, and so that's really enabling and tons of fun. You can be very specific or you can be very random. And so I run the vats every single day. And
wow.
Mainly it's just comforting because if what's on the design wall is terrible, at least the vats are going to be okay,
Wow, that's great. So do you end up using all of it, or do you like give any of it away? I mean, that's a lot of fabric.
Yeah. Do you need my address?
I feel like, yeah, you do use a lot of fabric. You do use a lot of fabric. But also I make a lot of bad stuff. So then it just goes back in. So,
Oh, wow.
It's not over till it's black. And that's a quote from Carol Sutherland. then you take discharge class, which I've yet to do, but.
Oh, wow.
I'm a little.
So you mentioned your sit-down sewing machine. What is your main machine for piecing?
Oh, it's, when I had a loaner for Bernina, and I was one of those people that went in there and talked to them, and they asked us, what is it that you really want? We're like, we want more room under the arm of the machine. And he was like a half an inch. And I'm like, no, 10 inches. We want more room. So I feel like the machine that I sew on, I feel like it's exactly what I asked for all those years ago.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's the babiest one of the 7 series, Bernina. So it doesn't have embroidery, but it does have a longer arm, and it has a beautiful built-in walking foot and just enough decorative stitches if I need that, So it's a wonderful. I think it's the last machine I'll ever need. I just love it.
That's great.
Wow.
And they couldn't seem to understand why we want room under that arm.
They got it now, didn't they? They figured it out.
Well, I'm using a Juki now, so I love it, and that's one of the reasons I love it.
I love my mechanical Juki so much, and there are projects exactly for that. And there's nothing like the power of, cutting with your foot. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, goodness. So I am just starting teaching quilt classes, and I know you have been. How'd you get started doing that?
Oh gosh, really reluctantly, right? Because there was a local shop where I was, buying stuff and making stuff, and they're like, "Whoa, teach that!" And I'm like, "Do what?" But I have an education degree, so I have performance degrees also, but I'm a teacher. I could do that. So I, just was terrible at it, but started teaching paper foundation piecing when nobody was doing it yet. So, that got me started locally, and then the quilts got known, and then nationally.
What software did you use to build your patterns? Just wondering.
A pencil.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
my dad was a design engineer for Gulf Oil, 44 years. And he couldn't answer a question without a pencil and paper. So you didn't ask him a question unless you had an hour and a half.
Okay.
So my brother is also a PhD in aerospace and mechanical engineering. So I'm that brain. Although I can figure out, I have that brain without making any money is how it works.
Right.
But no,
I understand that too. Yeah. But so did you just have when you built your foundations, you just did them with a pencil and graph paper? Or?
Still do. When I was in grad school, I took some engineering classes because I had a fellowship. So I'm like, I want to take design. So I took like drafting before it was computer aided, and so learned that, which was fun because it made me understand my dad a little better. But I still have those tools, and that's how I do.
Yeah, I start on graph paper, but I've learned how to use Illustrator, and
I should.
Never look back. Oh, it's a vertical learning curve. It's great, but it takes a while.
My friend and long-term mentor, Barbara Oliver Hartman, tells me that about graph paper. She just sees me buying armloads of graph paper, and she's like, the lines on there are optional. Been telling me that for years. I'm finally heeding her advice.
Yeah.
So I did notice too that you have some blocks or quilts available in Electric Quilter. Is that the case?
Yeah, they published that book for me with the one with Cinco de Mayo on the cover, which is long out of print. But if you run Electric Quilt, you can download those patterns.
Oh, got it. So do you have a favorite quilt that you've made of all of yours?
Yes. I mean, I should say it's the one I'm working on right now.
Sure.
But we're having an argument right now, that quilt and me. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I think my favorite quilt of all time is the Japan quilt, which nobody really saw because it was headed to Paducah. And that Paducah was canceled because of COVID. So, yeah, I made a quilt. I don't know where it's deep in my Facebook someplace.
Sure.
But yeah, my friends and I, Francis and Barbara and I and Heather, and we all went to Japan to go to the Great Quilt Show in Tokyo, and brought home truckloads of fabric, old Japanese fabric and new. And I was the quilts in that show just touched my heart in a way that I didn't know I had heart. Not the ones that you would expect, not the taupe quilts, but the WA category quilts, the very expressive ones. So my quilt wasn't expressive or passionate, but it was a sampler, and with all those Japanese fabrics, and just I learned construction techniques. I mostly applique, even things that look pieced now. I'm appliquing everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but that's my favorite quilt.
I still, to this day, have not done any applique, so you'll have to teach me sometime.
Oh my gosh.
I really hadn't done any until my Christmas tree, and I only did it under duress because I wanted that Christmas tree.
I love your Christmas tree so much. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I have no idea how I went there.
You did. And I'm just so proud of you.
So are there other quilters? I mean, you've mentioned a bunch of people, Barbara Soderlund, right?
Oh, Kim Soderlund. The diet.
Sorry.
Barbara.
Right. Okay. I mixed those names. And then Nancy Crow. Are there others that have inspired you?
Oh gosh.
Only a few.
A lot of people inspire me because of their love of things. Like Penny McMorris was a dear friend and a huge inspiration. She had a show on PBS on Saturdays when I was coming up, and the way that she loved new quilter quilts, beginner quilts, and antique quilts, and contemporary fiber art, and included a segment on all of those things in every show. And I think that it made me a really, I think, well-balanced quilter to have a legitimate passion for all of those things. And I think I am annoyed by quilters who compartmentalize themselves because it's all one thing. And we can't deny our history. Our history is beautiful and rich, and it's full of treasures. And I think I don't know. I feel passionate about that, about loving it all.
Absolutely. There's room for all of us.
Absolutely.
There should be. So
absolutely. I'm always like frustrated somewhat when, I'm around, and I'll just say it, like it comes up, with the, modern quilting and people, just trying to define. And I'm just like, can't we all just get along and like all make quilts?
Yeah. It's funny. It's unattractive.
And appreciate the contributions that we're all making. And I think the world is richer for the variety.
Right. But, and I mean, have a school, be a school, have a group, but, and have a body of work that has a characteristic that bonds it together. Sure. But there are many of those, And,
sure.
And we're all influenced by history. Yeah. Don't be clubby. Be an individual and live on the borders. It's awesome.
I like it here. It's good.
So do you have any favorite rulers or notions that you use?
Wow. I really love Elmer's glue. And poster board. So when I talk about, and I really love magic sizing. And I love, my really honest to God, truly favorite quilting tool is a retractable box cutter.
You want to explain that?
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I mean, I when I say applique, I can hand applique, Becky Goldsmith, we're buds. But really I do a lot of applique around a form, around a poster board form with starch and hold it still, glue based, and then machine quilt it down. So, yeah, I do a lot of that. So when I say applique, I'm not, it's not a virtuous kind of applique. It's a real utilitarian kind of.
Well, and virtuous is by whose definition anyway?
I could make a list of people that I consider virtuous. I'm not on it.
But it's, it's the clubby quilters that do it.
Yeah, I love Karen K. Buckley's scissors. I love Karen K. Buckley. But no, box cutter, things I can buy at the Dollar Tree. I'm all about it.
So, do you have other books in the works? Do you have anything else going that, you can let us in on the down low?
Well, I mean, I should be doing all of that. I'm so good at figuring out ways of not making money. And I enjoy teaching and showing up and then not thinking about business anymore until the next gig, and being in my studio and selling work. I really am more interested in selling quilts, and that hasn't gone badly. So, that's kind of where I am. I'm just working hard in my studio. And so I don't know that. I mean, isn't that the best part? Not knowing what's next.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, there's a line from Into the Woods that my mom and I quote back to each other all the time. How can you know what you want till you get what you want and you see if you like it? So
that's good.
Yeah, well, she's an artist too. She's also a quilter. So I've learned a lot. It's good. Very different style, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online to learn more about you and your quilts?
Well, I do have a website, but I don't do anything with it. So by the time this airs, maybe I will have. That would be a good motivation. But yeah, it's just Karen K. Stone, quilts.com, I think. And I'm on Facebook. Find me on Facebook and be my friend. My quilts are all there. Just look at the photos. The quilts are there. And Instagram. And I'm around. I'm available.
That's great. Well, again, we've been speaking with quilter Karen K. Stone. As she said, you can find Karen on Instagram at Karen K. Stone. And Karen, thanks a lot for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed being with y'all.
Thank you.
Great.